Welcome to TORAH Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 25 of TNT, the Twisted New Testament, with Rabbi Stuart Federow from Houston, Texas. Welcome, Rabbi. Welcome back to the show. No, keep dancing. Keep dancing. I love to see the finger dance. Oh, that's funny.
Right.
That's funny. Welcome back, Rabbi. It's good to see you.
Always good to be with you.
I feel guilty, though, because every time I say it's good to see you, I already saw you like 15 minutes ago. But it's still good to see you live. So there is a huge difference there. I'm happy with that. Wow. It's been a great week. Last week's episode, Rabbi, was a very hot one. I think that we're on a good roll in the sense of things. Meaning that the last video is a really excellent go-to video for anybody who is trying to answer a lot of questions to the missionary in one whack. That's what I think. So
I hope so.
What we're going to do is, I don't have the phone lines open yet, but they will be soon. What we need to do is we need to have probably about 3 more full videos, probably, maybe more. Maybe as we go, we'll find that there's more and more. But I think what I want to do is really focus on hitting some major topics, starting off with primary stuff like we did last week. We had 12 excellent topips that we hit last week.
That was a lot.
Man,
it was a long show, yeah.
And it was really, really loaded with the good information. And if you missed it, I'm telling you, you really missed a good one. I think I've got it written down right here, actually, because I was going to read them off because some people are watching this show for the first time. So just a real quick recap of what we did last week on episode 24. Claims from the New Testament: we're all sinners. Original sin, Genesis 8:21. Number 2, you're going to hell without Jesus. Number 3, you need the blood sacrifice. Number 4, hell, the whole concept of hell altogether. Number 5, the Akedah, the quote-unquote sacrifice of Isaac, which we now know is not a sacrifice at all. It was binding.
We don't even call it that.
Baruch Hashem. King David's son, the death of King David's son, being justified in the whole mix of blood sacrifices. Isaiah 7:14, the virgin birth. Covered that as well. The old idea of a demigod, a man, a biological mother, and a Zeus type blended. What would you want to call that? So a demigod situation. The idea of Jesus being a king and a priest. We covered the overall expansion of Moshiach, what it is in Daniel 9:25, dying for another sin, and Isaiah 53. All these are amazing topics. So tonight, we're going to follow a similar pattern, well, probably an exact pattern, just not the same topics. So we've got the first 3 lined up. We'll have the phone lines open for questions, and I'm sure we'll fill in the rest of them as we go along. The first one we're going to discuss is, pardon me, God has no form. That's the very first thing we have. Now, the thing that I thought was amazing, the verse, and maybe you can tell me where this is, Rabbi. The verse that talks about, says, I did not present myself in the form of a man or a form of an image, lest you worship that image. Right? And what happened with Jesus? They say that God came in this form of a man, and everybody worships him. I mean, it's amazing. It's like an absolute red flag and then a green flag, but there's a big wall of partition in between the two where you can't see the red flag. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 12 to 20.
Okay. Deuteronomy
4.
I'm going to pull it up. Hang on just a second. All right. Where art thou, Romeo? Oh, no, I had forgot to pull up an actual screen. Okay, Deuteronomy 4.
Verse 12 to 20.
4. I hope this is cool. 12. Okay, very good. And the Lord spake to Moses out of the midst of the fire, heard voices of words, but saw no similitude. Only you heard a voice and declared unto you. That's the one. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can go ahead and talk about that a little bit while I try to pull it up on the screen. My screen capture is not logged in.
I can't remember who it was, but someone recently put up a question on one of the Facebook pages that I'm on, basically asking about the idea of what God would look like
Right.
And my response was, as soon as you draw something that God is, the implication is that God is not the opposite of that. But how can you say God isn't something? If God is God, God can be anything. So, for example, if a person were trying to draw a picture of God and they drew God as someone from Asia, looking like someone from Asia,
yeah, that makes sense. Right.
okay, then you're saying that God isn't black. You're saying that God isn't a Native American. You're saying that God isn't, by showing what God is, you're limiting God. You're, whenever you try to create a form or a image, so to speak, of God, you're limiting God by saying God is that image, because the implication is God is only that image.
Right.
And so by making God an image that can't be accurate, you're creating a false image of God, which is what we call idolatry.
Interesting.
By the way, we do this in our prayers. Okay, we do this in our spiritual life, because sometimes we get mad at God and we'll say, I'm a good person. I try to be as righteous as I can. I do everything I think I'm supposed to do. I don't do what I'm not supposed to do. So my image of God is that God should have let me win the big lottery.
Right.
But I didn't win the lottery. So what I'm saying is that since God isn't living up to my image of what God should be, like giving me the winning ticket for a lottery, then I am angry at God. But what I've done by creating an image of what I think God should be is I've created an idolatry.
Interesting.
And we many people on earth do that because they have expectations instead of hopes. And when their expectations are not met, because they're trying to make God conform to an image they have of God, but all images of God, by definition, are false, and therefore are idolatrous. Because I expect God to do this for me. God did not do that for me. I'm mad at God. That's idolatry, because you're saying God didn't live up to your image of what you thought God should be. God is God. So we have to understand from the very outset that the Jewish concept of God is that God has no form. And the Deuteronomy 4, verses 12 to 20 that you were talking about really, spells this out.
Let's just read through that real fast. And the Lord spake pardon me. Excuse me. Yeah, King James.
Spoke.
And the Lord spake unto you out of the midst of the fire.
Sean, that was excellent.
Not too bad. Okay. You heard, let me switch verses. I'm going to go to Complete Jewish Bible. It'll probably be more fun to read. Okay, 12. Then Adonai spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no shape. There was only a voice. He proclaimed his covenant to you, which he ordered you to obey. The 10 words, and then he wrote them on 2 tablets. At that time, Adonai ordered me to teach you laws, rules. Okay, there's another verse somewhere. I need to find it. That said something about I did not appear to you in any form, lest you worship that image. And I was thinking,
it's coming.
It is here. Okay, therefore watch out for yourselves, since you did not see. My wife tells me all the time I'm a little too impatient. I'm like, no, I'm not. Give it to me now.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm exactly the same sort of.
That's funny.
When I'm driving to get to a place, I think I've already passed it when I haven't even come to it yet.
Gotcha. Therefore, watch out for yourselves, since you did not see a shape of any kind on the day Adonai spoke to you at Horeb from the fire. Do not become corrupt and make yourselves a carved image having the shape of any figure. Do not not a representation of a human being, male or female.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So if we understand God to be a male, which is like ridiculous, because that's maleness is a physical characteristic. Femaleness is a physical characteristic, but we understand God as having no form.
Wow.
Okay, we understand God as spiritual, so the whole concept of creating an image of God that is male or creating an image of God that is female is ludicrous at best.
Right. Okay, so God, God, you can't get around that anyway. I mean,
no, there's no way to get around it. And there's another issue that comes up, which we may have talked about last week, but I can't remember.
Okay.
But Christianity says that we needed a blood sacrifice. Christianity said that Jesus was that blood sacrifice when Jesus died on the cross. So the idea in Christianity is that something had to die. But if we understand, start over. We have to ask the question, what or who or whatever did the dying so that according to Christianity, the world can be saved from their sin and all that stuff.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
In the time, in Moses' time, even after that, before the temples were destroyed, was it so that something had to die regarding every sin you could possibly commit, like Christianity teaches?
No. And I'm pretty sure we did talk about this last week, but
just highlight, maybe in 1 minute.
Basically, the idea of animal sacrifices, and remind me about Maimonides relating to the animal sacrifices.
Oh, yeah, I've got a note here.
Okay, is that animal sacrifices were the weakest form of finding forgiveness because they only worked for unintentional sins.
Now wait, you just like totally threw a bombshell into Christian theology, because
you're right.
They teach, and everyone knows this, that every sin you could ever commit, the blood sacrifice will atone for every sin you could possibly think of, and there's no sin too great that will atone for.
Right. But that's not the way it works. And for every verse or text that talks about a blood sacrifice, around it or preceding it, or even in it,
wow,
it indicates that the sacrifice is only for unintentional sins. Okay, so for example,
wow, that's crazy.
Where does it start talking about sinning sacrifices? Leviticus chapter 4 verses 1 and 2 explicitly says, "And the Eternal spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a soul sins through ignorance in any one of these commandments of the Eternal concerning things which ought not to be done, and does any one of them," and then it goes on to talk about the sacrifice. You get that from Leviticus chapter 4, verse 13, Leviticus chapter 4, verse 22, Leviticus chapter 4, verse 27, Leviticus chapter 5, verse 15, Leviticus chapter 5, verse 18, Numbers chapter 15, verse 22, Numbers chapter 15, verse 24,
Wow.
Numbers chapter 15, verse 25, Numbers chapter 15, verse 26.
So this is not just a random mentioning. This is a very specific rule. And this is repeat. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now
Okay. So this is like a repeated thing over and over and over and
says-
over and
yes.
over again. This is not like a random mentioning that could maybe be taken out of context if it was only in there once.
Absolutely not. Bish gaga.
Unbelievable.
Translated variously as through ignorance or by accident or as a mistake. I mean, it depends on which translation. Bish gaga, through ignorance.
Okay.
A mistake, not intentional.
Okay, Firestarter on YouTube chat brings up a great point, right?
Okay.
Not to mention the fine flour atones for sin 100% the same. Explain that.
Whoa. Okay. What Firestarter is referring to?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
What do you mean?
I forget.
Okay,
I forget that you actually see the chat also. I didn't know if you were reading
okay.
that. Okay, good.
I was not looking at it at the time. I was trying to find something else
gotcha.
I was
Very
going to
good.
refer to. Okay, but there is a statement in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 11 to 13 that talks about a poor person who is not able to bring, and I know we talked about this last week, who's not able to bring a blood sacrifice, even of the cheapest form of sacrifice, which according to Leviticus chapter 5, verse 11 was the 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. The reason why they are the cheapest is because all you have to do is trap them. You don't have to feed them, nurture them, clean them, watch over them, whatever. You trap them, you bring them to the sacrifice, to the altar, and they can be sacrificed. And it's what if you can't even afford that? Does that mean that Does that mean that forgiveness is only for the wealthy who can afford a blood sacrifice? No, because if you can't afford it, then you can bring the flour for a sin offering, as it explicitly states, Leviticus chapter 5, 11 to 13. So
Wonderful.
that's what Firestarter is talking about.
Very good. Yep, and that's wonderfully said, because according to Christian theology, is
Firestarter
the
even
only
explicitly gives that verse in his comment.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So yeah, this is good stuff, man. This is good stuff.
Right, but the blood sacrifices were only for unintentional sin. So what exactly does that mean? What's an unintentional sin? So Moshe is at home, and he wakes up in the morning and he starts cooking his breakfast, and all of a sudden, knock, knock, knock on the door, and his friends who live nearby come, and he opens the door to them, and they say, "Moshe, come on, it's time to go to services at Shabbat." And he goes, "Oh my God, I was cooking on Shabbat." He forgot it was Shabbat. He started cooking. That's an unintentional sin. Okay, another possible scenario. Moshe wakes up in the morning, starts cooking his breakfast, knock on the door. The friends say, "Moshe, what are you doing? It's Shabbat." And he says, "So?" And he says, "You're cooking." He goes, "Yeah." "Moshe, you're not supposed to cook on Shabbat." "Really? I didn't know that." Okay, so the point is there are two scenarios, two ways a person can perform an act. Unintentionally, that act is a sin. So that's what those blood sacrifices, the only kind of sin that those blood sacrifices can obtain forgiveness for the person who did them.
Wow.
And that's what the Bible says. You can't argue with that.
No kidding. Okay, let's move forward. Number 2 we're going to cover is what do we do instead of blood sacrifices? You kind of touched base on with the flour, because that was back then, but what do we do now?
Right.
Hosea, you mentioned earlier.
Hosea chapter 11, I think it's verse 14.
Okay, so clarify the question in a very clear line with the Christian mindset, so the Christian watching this can know exactly what you're talking about.
All right. Christians will say, first, that you have to have a blood sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin. The next thing they will say is, you no longer have a temple to do those blood sacrifices in. Therefore, they will ask the question, how do you obtain forgiveness for your sin if you can no longer do blood sacrifices?
Okay, go ahead.
When the Jews were exiled into Babylonia at the first destruction of the temple, they missed the good old days, they missed the temple, but they never believed that God would not give them forgiveness for their sins because they didn't have a way to do a blood sacrifice. They knew even then that you didn't have to have a blood sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin, because there are many, many ways to obtain forgiveness other than a blood sacrifice for sin.
Right.
Okay. Going all the way back to the dedication of the very temple in which the sacrifices were offered. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 8 is the dedication ceremony where Solomon dedicates the temple. And remember, this is the place where the sacrifices were going to be offered. Solomon, in his dedication speech, okay, look at 1 Kings 8, 38 to 39. What prayer or supplication soever be made by any man or by all your people Israel, which shall know every man the plague of his own heart, and he spreads forth his hands towards this house. Okay, that's the temple in Jerusalem.
And this is 1 Kings 8.
Yes, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 38.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So here it says, spread forth his hands towards this house. That's why Jews in the west, when they pray, face east. Jews north of Israel face south.
Oh,
Jews,
nice. I see.
Exactly.
Got
Okay.
it.
It explicitly biblically commands this.
Okay.
Okay. Go on with 39. Then hear thou in heaven your dwelling place, and forgive and do and give to every man according to his ways, whose heart you know, for you only know the hearts of all the children of men. A few verses later, it's talking about the non-Jews. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 41 to 43. Moreover, concerning a stranger that is not of thy people Israel, but comes out of a far country for your name's sake, for they shall all hear of your great name and of your strong hand, of your outstretched arm, when he shall come and pray towards this house, hear in heaven, from your dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calls to you for, that all the people of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, that they may know that this house, which I have built, is called by thy name. And then finally, the great big one, the one that's the most, whatever, okay, is 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 46 to 50. Okay, this is the big one. If they sin against you, this is Solomon dedicating the temple that he built to God, the only place on planet Earth to the one true God, where all the sacrifices are going to be taking place. He says there's going to come a time where this is going to be destroyed. You're going to be carried off to the land of the enemy. All you have to do is repent, face this place, pray, stop doing the bad, start doing the good, and God will forgive you.
I love it.
Okay?
It's beautiful.
If they sin against you, for there's no one who does not sin, and you are angry with them, and you deliver them into the hands of the enemy, so that they carry them away captives into the land of the enemy, be they far or near, yet if they shall bethink themselves in the land where they are carried captives, and they repent and make supplication unto you in the land of those who carried them away captive, saying, we have sinned, we've done perversely, we have committed wickedness, which, by the way, is exactly what the Jews recite ritually on Yom Kippur. We have sinned, we've done perversely, we've committed wickedness. And so return unto you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies, which led them away captive, and they pray to you toward their land,